Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of STUDY7. As per usual, we have the usual suspects, myself, Chelsea, and Jerome. But as you can see, we finally have a new person on the show, Somalia. Welcome, Somalia.
Hey.
This is Somalia that Chelsea has been talking about
It's true.
for the last 5 episodes.
Just about.
All the name drops.
Yeah, so glad to have Somalia on tonight. Tonight we will be discussing the Sabbath and the end. Last week we would have focused on the first angel's earnest message to appeal to worship Him who made heaven and earth, etc. And that was a call to action which acknowledges the basis of all worship as the fact that we were created by God. Right? And tonight we will get into the topic, as I mentioned already, the Sabbath and the end. But before we get started, and before we get Chelsea to take over the rest of the conversation,
Wow.
I will ask our new guest tonight, Somalia, to pray for us.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us here another Sabbath that we could really study your word. We ask that you would send the Holy Spirit, that our hearts will be open and that we can learn something new. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Chelsea, all yours.
You only put it over to me because it's the memory text. I am assuming no one memorized it. So I'm not going to waste my time.
Somalia may have done it. You did that, Somalia?
Let's not.
Somebody knew. She's not getting into it.
Thank
So
you.
it is from Ephesians 3:9, and it says, "And to make all see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the ages has been hidden in God, who created all things through Christ." And continuing with my desire to have like a message in it or to see it, this one for me wasn't as straightforward. But obviously after going through the lesson, I think it becomes clearer. And what I found is there were more or less 3 key words in this text: the fellowship of the mystery, which when I did some reading, it was referring to, this whole thing we've been talking about, the divine plan of salvation through Christ, that may have not been fully understood in previous generations. Then it had the whole phrase about from the beginning of ages, which shows that, this fellowship of the mystery has been part of God's eternal plan from the beginning, which we saw in previous lessons. And then I think what is particularly pertinent for tonight is when it was emphasizing the fact that God created all things. So at the end it said, hidden in God who created all things through Jesus Christ. So that's signifying the role of Jesus as the creator, which we touched on last week, and we're going to delve into more again this week. So as Lewin kindly told us, this week's lesson is looking at the Sabbath and the end. So it's fundamentally 2 things, 2 basic but complex things, the Sabbath and the end, and how they kind of tie together. So to get into it, we take a lot of things for granted. All of us here are Seventh-day Adventists. So fundamentally, we know what the Sabbath is. We kind of came up with it. We hear about it in church. For all intents and purposes, we keep the Sabbath holy. But some people listening, this might be their first introduction to the Sabbath. So I really want to take a lot of steps back and just define what is the Sabbath fundamentally. And then having been a Seventh-day Adventist, what's your own personal definition of it? And how perhaps has that changed, not only with this lesson, but throughout your own religious journey?
All right, so you can start. The Sabbath is from 6 o'clock on a Friday to 6 o'clock on a...
Wrong already.
And that's when the Adventists is going to stand inside. And they can't
Already.
get invited to nothing. Right? That's the Sabbath.
Okay, Louis. Anyone wants to, fact check?
For me, the Sabbath is that 24-hour period that God has asked us to set apart so that we can, have some fellowship with Him, reflect on His goodness, and also acknowledge Him as Creator.
But when does that 24-hour period begin?
Friday, sunset.
At 6.
Whenever the sun sets, when it's not going to set at
Yes,
6
it's around
every
6,
day.
but
Well,
it's
not
not
all the
6.
time. When the seasons change, it's not going to be 6.
Right, so from the time the sunset
On a Friday.
until it sets on Sabbath, that is the Sabbath. I would say also my personal definition, I think the Sabbath for me was sometimes a day of rest and gladness. So going through school and UE and things like that. I used to finish my assignments early. I guess I used to be happy generally that I just didn't have work to do on the Sabbath. That opportunity to say no to things.
Wow.
Say no to the boss at work. Don't call me today because this is my day of rest and gladness.
Somebody had an answer for that one?
I guess, like, when I was younger, when I first joined the church, it was a lot more, I would say, burdensome. And it used to feel like, okay, as y'all say, I can't go outside, I can't do anything. But as I got more into it, it was more, okay, this is God, who I love, and I get to spend more time with him and spend more time in his word and fellowship with other believers. So that's more what the Sabbath means to me today.
I didn't like it. I mean, like, Somali said really nice. So I grew up, it was like burdensome. When I was young, I didn't like it at all. In the sense that you just knew it was that day. You can't watch nothing. You can't play. You just like, oh my word, it coming again. It coming. Mm-hmm. Like, that was when I was really young. It was like, oh, it coming up. And you're just sitting down there. And then sometimes, you know, when you were younger, the adults would go and talk and the thing and they do fall asleep, whatever the case. And you're there like, shh.
All this energy.
Yeah, you know, all this energy. You like,
nothing to do with this.
It's set. As soon as it's set, you're like,
Watching
yes. But then, honestly, as I went through life, I think as I said, the relationship gets deeper. Your understanding gets deeper as well. And even with this lesson, I learned something new. And when I was studying with the inverse lesson, they had a whole quarter on just what the Sabbath means and to delight in the Sabbath. And that really deepened it for me. So what I would say now, similar to what John said at the beginning, and the lesson had a really good excerpt. It says Sabbath is a place of refuge in a weary world. So the Sabbath is that dedicated time that God would have set aside for us to come commune with him, take a break from this world, to worship him both cooperatively, because we do go to church and whatever the case, but also individually. Sometimes we might forget that individual aspect. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're going to see as we go on more about how we actually keep the Sabbath. So for all intents and purposes, we can agree the Sabbath is a dedicated time, for all intents and purposes, a 24-hour period, from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, where God has called us to come away from our ordinary secular work, so to speak, our ordinary lives, to spend time with him. Yes? Mm-hmm. Good.
Just to add a little bit more, like, you know, the whole, we will all have birthdays, and on that day, you know, all the girls just want the day to be about them, so we want to go and get a spa treatment. Okay. We want to make sure that we want to get a dinner. You know, all them things.
And you don't want to do those for your birthday.
I was about to say, we ain't gonna shame you if you want to do them, though.
We ain't talking about me right now.
I understand. I got you.
But on that day, the focus is usually about her or them, right? Mm-hmm. With that said, Sabbath is kind of the same thing. Jesus saying, hold these other 6 days, do your thing on them days, right? But on the 7th day, just give me that one, right?
So in a sense, the Sabbath then should be like our best day of the week. Mm-hmm. Like, you know how Bajans got the Sunday food and thing. We should got a nice meal on Sabbath as well.
You shouldn't be hungry by the Saturday.
You know? Mm-hmm. So these things, all these, the week should build up to the Sabbath rest, in a sense.
So I guess then, before we get too much into how you spend the Sabbath and things that make it a delight, which is where you guys are going, how and where did the Sabbath originate? Was it just like, because we're Seventh-day Adventists, we just decided we need to be different and, you know, it can be Sabbath? Like, where did this whole Sabbath and Sabbath keeping come from?
Well, somebody had the answer earlier when we were talking before we started the podcast. So
no, I can let somebody else go. I would chime in.
Okay, the Sabbath would have started in the beginning, right? Jesus would have been creating the world. He would have done all that he had to do. He would have done all his work, but then the first 6 days. But on the 7th day, he was like, yeah, just separate yourselves from the work and all the other things that you will be doing on the prior 6 days. Have this 7th day dedicated to me.
So it started at creation.
Yeah.
And creation was in more or less the 7 days. So day one was...
I can't remember which day it happened on and all that.
Let there be light.
So day one was light. Day 2 was...
the separation of the waters.
Separation of the water, so the firmament. Day 3...
vegetation.
Plants, sorry.
Planets.
Day 4...
the
sun, moon, and stars.
Day 5.
Number 5.
Yeah, I know there's a song. I don't know the way that you learned this song in Sabbath.
He made the animals.
I didn't know one of them want special music.
And he also made 2 people, and he called them Adam and Eve.
And then on day 7,
he rested.
He rested. So as Louis said, and it's in actually, if you wanted to see it, is in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 to 3, where it says, and on the 7th day, God ended his work, which he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work, which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. So it originated at creation, from the beginning of time. And I think, like, I find it interesting as well that here is God, all powerful, almighty, created the earth in 6 days, and then he decides, you know what, there needs to be a day of rest, so to speak, to just come apart, to reflect, and to spend time.
And that's not to say that God was tired when he created earth, but he saw it fit to institute this thing.
It was a gift to us, basically.
A gift to us from the beginning of time.
It's funny enough, I was just having a conversation with some persons who were saying, you gotta start working all the time or you're gonna burn out. Is kind of interesting that even though the Lord didn't necessarily separate the Sabbath from the rest of the week for we to lay down be better, and you know, but it's interesting that he would have seen the need to have a day separate and apart from doing all the other things that we would generally do on a regular basis.
I mean, generally we as humans need rest. As the person said, you know, you don't want you to burn out. So I guess people all generally understand that day of rest, but people don't generally attribute it to the Sabbath.
Right. So it's like, I mean, the Bible didn't necessarily say this, but if we're giving it some thought, it would almost be as though the Lord, knowing that we will be hardworking people, so it fit, even though he wants the day to be about him, to have us to come away from this work. So it's like it has a two-pronged effect.
Yeah.
The day is about God, but there are also other benefits that come about on the day as a result of you following God's command.
True.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Like, I think when you get that mental refreshment, it helps you physically. And I was thinking practically, like, you know, when you were back in school and everybody would either be, it seems like they have more time to study. They got all the days a week. They got all the nights or whatever. And I always just like, that's so unfair. But then when I look back on my own school and work, like, you always seem to be ahead or more productive. It's like, you're like, well, yeah, I done already, submit that. They're like, oh, you're not. And it's like, what you was doing? So I feel like it forces us to have as well better time management.
Yeah, I started like that about when I was at university. Like, I had to submit assignments like
Friday.
So yeah, so if assignment was Saturday night, I had to submit by the Friday, and it used to feel good knowing that
Your work.
it's chilling.
Because other persons
People just
aren't
spending
going to
their
crunch thing. Yeah, man. So you could definitely look on it and see, even though the Lord didn't necessarily say that he created the Sabbath for all of these other things, multiple benefits of that day of rest.
Yeah.
Even though it's not solely supposed to be a day of rest, but yeah.
Which I think we'll get into. You had anything to add for that one, Smiley?
I was saying, like, I find a lot of the consensus now is that rest is productive. And it's interesting because we been knew this. That rest is productive. So we already had this kind of like a remedy to hustle culture. Like, the answer was already there. So it's interesting to see how as time progresses and we talk more about hustle culture, it's like, okay, but we have the Sabbath. So we have a remedy to that.
You're not Chelsea. Rest is productive.
So I don't rest? I'm confused.
Moving forward.
So we established what the Sabbath is. We shared our own experiences. Of course, you could share yours in the comments too. And we looked at, you know, how it originated. And we also, in our explanation what the Sabbath, we said when it is remembered or recognized. So then bringing it home, we talked about, you know, Friday sunset and Saturday sunset. But there's many people who actually argue that it doesn't make a difference, you know, what day they keep as the Sabbath. So long as we keep one, you know. There's Monday to Sunday in a week. Sunday, yeah, all of those all in there. And it's like, you know, just pick one, you do Monday, do Sunday, whatever, it's fine as long as you keep one holy. So when exactly is the Sabbath? And is it dangerous to have this mentality? Like, what are your thoughts towards this based on, you know, what people are saying? Does it have to be on the seventh day, which is Saturday, or can we just assign a day and say, this is Sabbath, I can spend some time with God?
I don't know, I think God, multiple places in the Bible express when this day is. So you got creation, God rested on the seventh day of the week.
He said seven.
You got the 10 Commandments, tell us that we got 6 days to do all our activities, and the seventh day we need to rest. And then you got the account of the crucifixion when Jesus was buried on the Sabbath on the Friday. Sabbath you rested in the tomb, and then Sunday you rose again. I think it sort of leads you to this conclusion that the seventh day, which based on our calendar is Saturday, is the Sabbath. And I guess when people say, you know, it doesn't make any difference, I guess one point I would add is there's a verse in James 2 verse 10 which says that we are to keep all God's commandments essentially, and if you break one, we're guilty of all. So I would say it matters which day we keep. God asked for the seventh day, and so we need to give him the seventh day.
That's interesting. Like, thinking about it again, I think using birthdays might be a good reference point, right?
Very close.
My birthday is July 12th.
As is mine.
Yeah, so we like a
As
birthday
is
yesterday,
mine.
guys. Anyhow, birthday is July 12th. That's like saying it's January 14th though, and I can celebrate my birthday today. You understand? Like the Lord.
Or well, worse yet, somebody else throwing a party for you on the wrong day.
A birthday party.
On the wrong day.
You understand? Like I get sometimes you might try to throw it close because well, I might be at work on that day or whatever. You maybe exceptions like that.
Yeah.
But celebrating my birthday in January though, like that's crazy. Or Christmas in July. Like you don't do anything, so why
It don't matter which day, Lewin. It's just the fact you get a birthday party, you should be happy.
Right. Foolishness. Right? And the same stance that what I take and I assume you guys here take and those of you viewing agree with as well, which is we want to celebrate our birthdays generally on that day.
Yeah.
I don't see why when the Lord say, yeah, the seventh day, that's the one I want. You can say, well, we could do it on a Wednesday. You know, the man say what he want. The man say what it is. They ain't got no more discussion about the seventh day. This is the end. That's my take on it.
And I guess my thing too is like even when you look around, when persons say, well, maybe Sunday is their Sabbath, is it really reflecting their attitude? So they go to church on Sunday and afterward they like jump and go to Weber Fest or maybe go into the supermarket, go and do all sorts of other things. You know, so even though they chose a day that is not the Sabbath and call it their Sabbath, they're still not keeping it holy.
So my thing is regarding Sunday, right? Nothing wrong with going to church on a Sunday, you know? Nothing is wrong with that.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, right? And the truth is, the Adventists is all going to do that too. Get church on a Sunday night. Right? Nothing wrong with your church on a Sunday. But if you keep in that day, as the Sabbath, that's where the problem comes in. Because the Lord specifically said, like, that's like probably one of the few, if not the only, commandments in the Bible where the Lord say, remember.
I think
That's
it's
the
only one of the
You know what I'm saying?
And that's the one we forget.
That's just, yeah. So it's like you say remember because people can forget.
Because
So
we
Jerome,
knew that we were going to do foolishness.
yeah. So Jerome, you remember to bring me that shirt tomorrow evening. You understand? I telling you so because I know Jerome gonna more let you forget. And no look at we know. Anyhow, that's enough for me.
Well, I was saying, you know how Jerome was saying, certain people's heart posture might not be in the right place in terms of keeping the Sabbath. So I think it goes back to keeping something holy. It really goes to show that we can make something holy. God already made the Sabbath holy. So in order for us to try to prescribe, okay, I could keep this other day, then it goes against that, because then we're taking it upon ourselves to try to make something else holy.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say to that point.
That was such a point. We could end there.
We need you more, Samantha.
That was a
We need you
point.
here more.
I would
Yeah,
take on Louis mic and just do a mic drop. I never thought
Oh,
about it. Like,
you could try. I don't know if you will let you.
I didn't like when she said, like, remember, so I did to keep it holy. As she said, only God can make something holy. He said it's the seventh. So I can't come and say, all right, Monday, Holy Sunday. Like, I can't do that.
Also, there's like a corporative element, as you were saying. So if Lewin decide he can keep Wednesday, Chelsea can keep Thursday,
Then-
Jerron keeps Sunday, I keep
Where is it coming
Saturday.
together?
Exactly. And
Unless we
also, you could keep a bunch of different days as well.
So there's no consistency.
Yeah, so that just came out like, so you could keep the Sabbath. You understand? You could. I don't know if we can get at that at a later point, but you could determine or agree with the fact that, yeah, the Lord, that's your Lord's day, and we should keep that. I acknowledge that the seventh day is the Sabbath, but it's not only to remember; it's also to keep it holy. You understand? Like, and He is the one who set it up to be that holy. So, like, acknowledging that the seventh day is the right day is part of it, but that's not all of it. So yeah.
Yeah, well, you actually led us right into the second part. Because the first thing is remember the Sabbath day. He didn't want us to just remember. It wasn't like a memory game. As you said, it is to keep it holy. So my question then is, what is keeping the Sabbath holy? And how does that relate to worshiping the Creator? Because remember last week we spoke about worshiping the Creator. And as you'll see, the Sabbath is linked, as we're going to come down, to not only worshiping the Creator, but the whole end time. So I just want to know for this one, like, what does it mean to keep the Sabbath holy? Or how do we keep it holy, I should say?
I feel like Jerome got the answer.
Yeah, because I googled the word holy. And when I googled the word holy, it talks about something or some person being dedicated or consecrated to God. So when I hear remember the Sabbath, keep it holy, I'm thinking that this day, well, yes, about physical rest that God, called to set us apart. It's supposed to be a day where all our thoughts and our actions are to be drawn or focused on God. And so essentially God is the focus of the Sabbath. And relating this back to worshiping the Creator, I had made the point last week that when we worship, that God is spirit, that a verse in the Bible that says that God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. And I believe the truth here refers to the commands that He set up in the Word. And the standard that He has set is that the seventh day is the Sabbath. And so we should ensure that we dedicate that Sabbath day to spending time with God. And not to say that we shouldn't worship Him every day.
On the other days, right?
On the other days,
Every single
but
day.
especially on the Sabbath day.
So what you were saying, I think is Nigel that always saying 6, if you worship God. Oh yeah, we name dropping them. That's what you gotta do. So like, if you are only worshiping God on Sabbath, 6 days a week, you're like, now you're about this God thing. And then on Sabbath, you're like, okay, no, I'm about God. Then your Sabbath experience is going to be intrinsically weaker because you alienate God from all the rest of your week. So in order to make the Sabbath that highlight of the week, then you need to have God through all of it. You can't just come on Sabbath and say, okay, well, this is going to be holy. I do everything I need to do during these 6, so no, this is the holy day. So it needs to be a daily walk in order for the Sabbath to be consecrated or sanctified.
I enjoy my birthday analogies, right? So once again, it's like, you cannot care for me all the other days of my life. You understand? In a year.
Happy birthday, Louis.
And then on my birthday, you want to show up. You understand?
Show up and turn up at the party.
That's me out. As Somali was saying, I gotta be getting love from you and care and interactions and all that there from you throughout all the other times that it isn't my birthday.
And it should build up.
Right. So that connection being built so that when that time come around and you want to buy me games for my PlayStation 5, right? It is then meaningful because we would have already had this connection over a certain time period. So on the birthday now when you come to celebrate me, I feel special knowing that you were there all the other days as well.
True.
Which shows that keeping the Sabbath holy requires preparation. So you don't just come in like, oh, sunset, flip the switch. You know there's a challenge to actually flip the switch, but nonetheless, flip the switch. And they're like, yes, Lord, I am holy. I am ready to be holy. It is, as Somalia and when I think John said, it requires some form of preparation. You have to prepare for it week after week. And I guess in keeping it holy, there is the cooperative element where we fellowship with one another, we go to church and stuff. But that's not just the entirety of the Sabbath. You still have to, because you could go to church, and I think we'll get to that a bit later, and you'd be doing all the things at church, running around, but you didn't have that individual time with God, which is ultimately what He calls you apart to do. So for me, like, keeping it holy is really having that time set aside to spend with Him. Whether you do that in nature, devotion, whatever the case may be, your relationship with God. He's a personal God. So the way that I'm going to connect with Him and communicate with Him may be different from you. So it's kind of like prioritizing that in that time as well, I would say.
Yeah, I guess, sorry for me, based on the point you were saying about, running around for church. I guess for me, and I guess maybe a little controversial, but yes.
No, we like that.
Yeah, but all the work that you end up doing on Sabbath for church, to me, sort of takes away from the whole Sabbath experience, in my opinion.
That's why you shouldn't. Sabbath should not be burdensome.
Burdensome.
Yeah, but sometimes when people hold so many offices at church and go to
You
so many
shouldn't
things
be
at church,
holding
then
so many offices.
you end up, I guess, working on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
What we could do is we could do some hot takes after we finish the podcast.
I ain't gonna be here for that one.
But no, I agree with that completely. I think we'll probably touch on that too as we go down. So more or less we've covered what the Sabbath is, when it occurs, how to keep it holy, and then remember the lesson is the Sabbath and the end. So we covered the Sabbath aspect. So what is the end? So again, you hear Sabbath and the end, somebody may be like, the end of what? And of course, if you weren't tuned into the previous episodes that we might have had, you might be asking yourself that question. So just for intents and purposes, what's the end?
The times we living in now. We living in the end times. All these wars and rumors of wars and things.
Chelsea's like, bring it out.
Breaking it down. So like, of course, this whole lesson is the three angels' messages, which speaks to the great controversy, which we described in the very beginning. Of course, you could feel free to go out to any of these episodes or read any of the previous lessons. Is the battle between good and evil, between Jesus and Satan. And we know that the end is when that is finally going to come to an end, when Jesus is going to finally defeat Satan. So that's really the end. And the thing is, we know the end is really for us to, as we've said outline, pick which side we're going to be on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what they mean by the end and living in the end times, as John said, and things that are going to come to pass, all the prophecies and stuff that we spoke about a couple weeks ago.
So what does the Sabbath have to do with the end?
That's what we're here to find out tonight.
I guess when you were talking about choosing what side we on, from the beginning of the podcast, we were making this point that the whole three angels message ready to warn us and for us to decide where we stand. And if we say that our loyalty lies with God, then we should be following what God says.
And he says, remember the Sabbath day.
But I think, like, you wanted to add something? Sorry?
No.
No, I was thinking, like, what this lesson brought was that the Sabbath is really at the center of the great controversy, which we just described as the great controversy is the end times and stuff like that. And I think to really understand the link, we have to kind of go back to the previous lesson and the relationship between Sabbath keeping and worshiping the Creator. So remember we spoke last week about worshiping the Creator, and I had asked the question, how do you worship the Creator? One area where we didn't go into was you show your love and you worship Christ through obedience to His commandments, right? And the lesson brought that out. And when we talk about obedience to His commandments, all the commandments, including the fourth commandment, which is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall not labor, do all the work. 7th is the day of your Lord. So, and for me, it's really that particular commandment that's going to be under attack in the end times. Fundamentally, because of morality, nobody's going to be like, okay, yes, let us steal, let us kill. Those are always going to more or less be seen as, well, this
things
is
are wrong.
Wrong,
right.
Yeah. But to me, the one that's under attack and being subjective, just as we said, where people are like, the 7th day and Saturday is this day, that day, I pick and I choose and I move in it, is the 4th commandment. So we then see with that the rise of false worship, so to speak, the changing of the 7th day and stuff like that, all of these things which brings to the end time. So as you can see, that's really the center of everything. And I was just, the lesson said something I thought was really interesting. They said, the real issue in the last days is our love and loyalty to Jesus. According to the Bible, this love is expressed in obedience to the commandments. And if you want biblical proof of that, you can find that in 1 John 5 and verse 3 and Revelations 14 verse 12. And the Sabbath alone among the commandments gets behind everything because it alone points to God as creator. No wonder it will be the outward symbol of the final divide between those who worship the Lord and those who worship the beast. So I thought that was real nice how they link
It's
it.
interesting though. I know, Chavoy, if you don't want to cast me no right, but looking at it right, that was a smart fella, The way how he's go about trying to win, even though we know that you won, it is pretty interesting. So as you were saying, we could all agree that killing is bad. We could all agree that stealing is bad and all the other stuff. But then he's come at things that might be a little.
He started into that little dope and things. So like the case with Adam and Eve with the fruit, the forbidden
the
fruit.
apple.
That was the one.
Yeah, I heard.
But he didn't tell them that they're going to die. He's like, well, you will not surely die. So it wasn't necessarily a lie, but he was trying to just give it a little
Half
dope.
truth,
Half truth, give a little dope about it.
He's a smart fellow, You must give him that. And then like even though like how persons would go to church on a Sunday to keep that day, right? No, nothing wrong with getting church. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with going to church on a Sunday either, because Adventists do it too, right? Right. But the fact that he would then try to move, or encourage us to then, he ain't stopping us from worshiping, you know. He's saying, just worship on another day. Like, smart fella.
So do the right thing the wrong way.
Yeah, smart fella, you know.
It's like this false sense of security.
Yeah. Smart
We
fella.
still worshiping.
Like people who's got the front of them, then host gates up, right? Fence up, but the sides open. Yeah, that's
That was the best analogy you gave tonight.
I'm feeling the parties.
So anything else to add on that point, or we kind of like understand the link?
I was saying, in addition to that, like if you were talking about the link between the end and the great controversy and all that and the Sabbath, if you look at the terminology in Revelation 14:7, it says to worship him that made heaven and earth, the sea and the fountains of waters. And then we go back to the Sabbath commandment in Exodus 20:11. It says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is. So it's like that direct link of terminology. And that's known as the seal of God, basically. And is highlighting God as creator in this sense. So if we want to look at the link between the end and Sabbath, is linking to creation. Sabbath was instituted at creation in the beginning. God is God of creation, and then in the end times, he's also our Redeemer. But everything points back to who God is, God that made the earth. So there's no doubt about who God is or which God this is that we're talking about. So I think that's one of the interesting links between the Sabbath and the end.
She sounds like she's studying.
Profound.
I tried. I did try a thing.
Smile as my study buddy. See? I can't put two of you all because
Don't do it.
it
Don't
shows.
do it. Don't
It
do
shows.
it.
It
Don't
just
do
shows. It just
We need to get real.
shows.
I draw some fire comments. Like, don't do it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess like as we see, there is a link, as Somalia said, with those verses you can directly see in the beginning of the Bible, in the end of the Bible as well, and then linking it together. It all points back to Jesus, our God, as the creator, and how that's all going to play out in the end. And that's what I think is really important if you want to understand this, to also study the lesson before, which was worshiping the creator. So I guess as we come home, what is the true intent of Sabbath worship as it relates to eternal rest, and how does keeping the Sabbath point us forward to eternity? Because we usually see it as a symbol towards what is to come.
Yeah, so that time we spend with God here on earth, to me, is supposed to point us towards that time where we spend an eternity with him. And given that at that point in time where we go to heaven, all the cares and everything of the earth will be passed away, I guess we'll truly experience what a Sabbath is supposed to be, where all we actually have to do is focus on God. We don't have anything else to worry about. So I think that's what the Sabbath here is supposed to point us to.
Also, it's like, if you can't get it right here, you don't want that there either. Because if you can't spend time focusing on Jesus, worshiping him, what you want to go up and have
For a little
like,
24 hours.
Yeah, you could do
Yeah,
one
man.
day, but you already know
You're
for
ready for
24
eternity.
hours, 365 days.
I pay them.
Eternity.
I pay them for you. Yeah, that's
But it goes back to what y'all were saying about relationship. So like if your relationship with God is like, yeah, then Sabbath is yeah. So then it's like how would that eternity look like for you? You'd be uncomfortable in heaven, as some people would say.
right. So that's the way like we're supposed to spend that time. No, as John was saying, building that relationship. So like we trailing it with like sleepovers. You understand? You getting a sleepover before you move in.
Cut these out.
Before you move,
Stop it.
before you move in and live with me, you getting weekly sleepovers
Fair
to see if
enough.
everything working
Fair
out.
enough.
And then at some point in time, you can move in and live with one another. What do you think?
Fair.
That's a great analogy. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Well.
Pat yourself on
Well
that,
done,
right?
I guess.
There you go. I had some points that as I was doing it, I came across it, how keeping Sabbath points to forward to eternity. So the first one was rest and restoration. The Sabbath provides, the designated day of rest where we come apart from our activities. And that reminds us that, as we said, after creation, God rested. But it also points us towards the future rest that is going to await us in eternity. And then in Hebrews 4:9-11, it speaks of a Sabbath rest for the people of God, suggesting, that observing the Sabbath is a foreshadowing of the eternal rest we experience in we will experience in His presence. Another point was communion with God. We're again linking it back to that dedicated time of worship. And that's what you guys said, like, if you can't spend it now, how you gonna be up there?
Miserable, you mean miserable.
So I don't. That's just the same point there. I don't want to delve too much on that. And then another one was anticipation of the new creation. Sabbath serves as a reminder of God's creation and His intention to restore all things. So that's Samalia's point that she made on how they're kind of linked as well. So observing the Sabbath, we anticipate the future fulfillment of God's promises, including the renewal and restoration of creation. And then in Isaiah 66:22-23, it would describe, how Sabbath observance will continue as well. So I thought that was a good one. And then there's just this idea where you could prioritize the eternal over the temporal. So keeping the Sabbath and setting it aside intentionally and not focusing on worldly pursuits and focusing on the spiritual matters helps us to shift our perspectives that this world isn't our home, and kind of like looking towards the eternal realities of God's kingdom that is to come. So those was kind of like my bullet points that I noted down.
You study too.
I did study.
Good stuff.
I did study. Any other points on that?
Nah, I think it's time to bring it home.
So before we bring it home, we looked at the Sabbath and we looked at the end. And we looked at how they are linked together, right? So apart from not believing, you were saying, Louis, that, the devil is real sly, real cunning, all of that.
You might as well get job,
Right, so my next question is, apart from not believing in Sabbath,
I appreciate the effort.
Whoa.
apart from, moving on from Louis, apart from not believing in the Sabbath or embracing a false Sabbath, which we address both of those, how might Satan be undermining the Sabbath for those who actually believe in it and observe it? So this is now people, for all intents and purposes, us. We believe in Sabbath, we observe it. So, but how would Satan be kind of undermining that?
I guess for me, one way undermining it is sort of turning the Sabbath into like a series of events.
Programs.
So where we're just spending time. So Friday night we got Bible study, Sabbath morning we got church, Sabbath evening we got EA. But when we're not at these events, our minds are all over the place. So our conversations are those that we generally have in the week. We decide we want to turn on TV to put on nature show just because we want to watch TV. But we give this false impression that we, observing God's creation. And we just want to watch TV.
You do that little nature show sometimes. It's put on sometimes, be honest.
Don't dry the body down at home. That is you.
Let me watch the dolphins.
That is you alone.
Projecting.
Or we just scrolling through social media and things like that. So to me, he was starting to make this out an event. So church, Bible study, the away, and then in between that, back to regular programming.
That's very interesting, because it's like, okay, you could be lost doing the right thing. So we go to church. Church is like a robotic right now. If you get to church at this time, this thing can be happening. You can stand up, sit down, turn around, and then it's evening.
Somebody.
And you just is a series of events. I don't really think that we genuinely acknowledge, what this day the Lord wants us to worship Him. I think we say it, but I don't really see it enacted greatly. We focus on having things to occupy our time that may be related to Him, but not really focusing on the fact that we are to be worshiping Him. And I think that's where the problems could come, because as you were saying, you could be lost doing the right thing, not focusing on Jesus, and that's that is breaking this off too.
So you're essentially keeping the Sabbath, but
not keeping it holy.
Yeah. So my thing is, it's very intrigued up to where our hearts are. Our hearts are supposed to be set on God at this time.
And if that was true, we would see different things happening on the Sabbath at these churches. But anyhow.
In addition to what I would say, making it unnecessarily burdensome. So all the do's and the don'ts of Sabbath, you can't do this, you can't do that, but you must come to church and do all these things. Otherwise, it's not really keeping the Sabbath. Like you try to take an AOA program outside, or you try to put the divine hour, you try to shake it up, but that's not Sabbath
You're
keeping.
doing too much, son.
Or don't do dot.
Yeah,
or don't
so I
do
think-
doxology.
Honestly. So I think like even when we talk to people who are not Adventists, they have the thought of, oh yeah, that thing that you're always saying that you gotta be inside by 6 o'clock. Which sounds ridiculous to us, but that's generally how people outside view the Sabbath because of how, sometimes because of how we keep it or the limitations that we put on ourselves. So I think that that's one of the ways that's on the mind, because it's supposed to be a delight. We're supposed to enjoy it because, as again, this is God and we're supposed to have love for God and fellow man. And these are things that all the love and everything, that's supposed to be really shown on the Sabbath. So when we don't have that, then I think people see it as, oh, you can't do nothing, y'all in this religious thing, y'all,
Religious prison for 24 hours.
Exactly. Can't talk.
Because we focus so much on the can'ts. We don't really show people what you could do, and we don't really show them that it is fun. Like some people don't believe you could have fun on the Sabbath or enjoyment. Like if I say fun, it would be too radical a word. Too radical a word. Enjoyment or delight. Yes, delight. Some people do not realize that you're supposed to delight in the Sabbath. So it's like, as you said, yeah, people identify you by those that go in 6 to 6, that church that's good 9 to 1.
They can't
Come
call
back
you. They can't
again,
call you to do
1
nothing on the
to 4.
Sabbath because you know.
I get one of the messages this morning. So I want me to do something. I was like, I can't call you till 6:30, right? But I know we say a lot of don'ts on this question we didn't prepare for in particular. But what are some things that we could do on the Sabbath?
I
Ain't going in too deep.
believe, but apart from church and fellowshipping, just like you have to know your individual things. So sometimes I like nature, so I would go out, whether to a park, what's not, and do devotion, or I like hanging out with my friends in the sense of we do like a little potluck or after service go and fellowship, and you could talk about different things. I guess that's the hardest thing though. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Are we talking
that's the
because you might
basic
get
It might just be sociable.
Yeah.
A social
Yeah.
visit.
so it's like kind of making sure you guard against those distractions and actually have like conversations focused on God. But I think for me, one of the biggest things is to have that individual element, because sometimes the individual element is just me sleeping physically. So right, so that's what I'm saying, because you get so tired from all the things we spoke about the programming. Now when you finish 9 to 1, you get home, you eat, then you get a little nap in before AOA. Then AOA just go to the sunset and you say, oh my gosh, it's gone already.
So what we take Chelsea's example of what not to do. What can we do?
Examples of what to do.
One example.
But I guess my thing is,
yeah.
if the Sabbath is the point, it's about creation. I guess, as Chelsea said, we can spend time in God's creation.
Okay.
So
And
go
actually-
out, spend time in nature, and use that time to reflect on God's goodness and the fact that He gave you all these things. When He created the earth, He gave man dominion. Obviously, He gave us all these things for our enjoyment. So we should take time to enjoy them.
Some of them.
Oh, I was saying, for those people who are at church faithfully carrying out their posts, like do it joyfully. It's not to say stay home for church and don't do what you need to do. But I think that even in those things, you should see God. So it should be a part of your experience, even if that's how you choose to spend the Sabbath. Like, have joy in all those things. So that's my addition.
My one example would be, if you're hanging out with your friends, that's fine. But one thing that you could potentially do is consider the things that you would have gone through this week or the week, and look at probably one thing that the Lord would have done for you during that time period. Because it is supposed to be like in celebration and worship to Him. So that's my 2 cents.
I'll give my one thing, even though it didn't offer.
It wasn't good enough, Chelsea.
Chelsea feelings hurt.
Anyways, I was saying also doing good on the Sabbath. Because sometimes people
That's true.
feel like you can't do good on the Sabbath. As you said, they can't call you for certain things. When you find out what the request was, is like, well, yeah, I would have come and help you with that. That wasn't breaking the Sabbath. So I would say doing good on yourself. Not that you limit your doing good on yourself. You're a terrible person during the week and say, oh my gosh, I'm good today. I want help today. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like where there are needs that you can fill as well. I would suggest encourage doing that as well too.
Very cool.
So So we covered a lot today. We went through fundamentally what the Sabbath is, the Sabbath commandment, when the Sabbath is, and then we linked it to the end times and how they're interrelated. And we looked at, what necessarily not to do, what to do. So now, as we close, any closing thoughts from anyone?
I will just close with the point that we made here. The simple point that if we can't take time out to spend just 24 hours with God here on earth, how can we honestly say that we want to spend an eternity with Him?
So wait, Jerome's trying to hurt feelings and things.
Just to add to what Jerome said, is about relationship. So if you want to enjoy the Sabbath, you need to grow closer with God and trust Him to show you what to do and how to keep the Sabbath every single week. Agreed.
Mine. Eve would be so annoyed if she heard me with that. Is an excerpt from the lesson study. It says, the Sabbath is a place of refuge in a weary world. Each week we leave the cares of this world and enter God's retreat center, the Sabbath. Each Sabbath day, God's heavenly palace descends from heaven to earth, and the Lord invites us into the glory of His presence for this 24-hour period to spend a time of intimate fellowship with Him. So, with that in mind, Lewin, do you want to give us the closing prayer?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Dear Heavenly Father, thanks once again for allowing us to be here safely to discuss your word on the podcast. I pray that those who would have been watching us for the last few minutes may have taken something that they could take into their lives and actually enact so that they can make better decisions for you. I hope that persons will be touched, and I hope that as persons continue to view that, they will be drawn closer to you and being able to share your word with others. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So, thank you all for tuning in to the STUDY7 podcast this week. Thank you to Somalia for joining us and bringing the gems.
Bring snaps.
It was a pleasure.
Right?
Lewin, please have some decorum.
Listen the part yet.
So we hope you were enlightened by the discussion in some way, and of course it is Sabbath. You are viewing on Sabbath, and we just spoke about the Sabbath. So we hope that you truly are able to spend that time in intimate fellowship with Christ and in deep communion with Him. We look forward, of course, to your comments on the video. So let us know your thoughts, anything you want to share, perhaps how you're going to delight in the Sabbath today. So please like and share with a friend. If you haven't already, you can click the subscribe button, and you can follow us on Instagram to stay updated. And our lesson next week is going to be focused on a city called confusion. So we look forward to seeing you guys as we delve into that topic and as we have more surprises ahead. So until then, have a happy Sabbath and God bless. Bye.